This is Mikey Borup for PremiumBeat.com, and in this After Effects course, you will learn the basics to advanced features of After Effects: interface, shape layers, motion tracking, compositing, and more. During these tutorials, feel free to pause, rewind, and ask questions. I will be using After Effects CC version 12.2, but most of the techniques learned can be used in older versions. In this video, we will cover 3D, cameras, lights, the Ray Trace renderer, and Cinema 4D Lite. So let's fire up After Effects and get started. Hey, so here I am in After Effects, and I've got a brand new composition already here. I called it 3D, so let's set up some basic things to show you how 3D works in After Effects. So let's just bring a text layer down. Let's call this something clever like text. Let's make this nice and big. Now, in order to create 3D out of this, we need to check a little box down here. And right here, if I hover over this, it says 3D layers, allow this to be manipulated in 3 dimensions. And I'm going to check that, and now you can see there's a little bounding box. There's some red, blue, and green arrows, and it's 3D. When we come in here, there's a new option that says Material Options. If I undo that, see that goes away. Other things that's new is in the Transform, you can see we've added orientation, we've added rotation in 3 directions, we've added another position in Z-space. So I can move that in Z-space. So just quickly, let me show you how this is 3D, and I'm going to hit W on the keyboard, and that brings up my rotate tool. So I hit W, and I'm going to rotate around the Y-axis, or the X, or the Z. And you can see that is indeed 3D. Now, in After Effects, this is called 2.5D, because if I were to move this exactly 90 degrees, you can see it's 0. There's nothing there. It's completely empty. There's no thickness to it, so it would disappear. And there's a way we can fix that, and I'm going to talk about that later in this video. So, basics, yeah, you can see this is 3D, and everything is moving around, as usual, the anchor point. So I can take Y on the keyboard. It brings up this tool here, which is the pan behind tool, and I can move this anchor point to a different spot, and then when I rotate, it'll be all around that same anchor point. Now let's add a camera to this. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to take this text and let's change the color of it. Let's go blue. Then let's add a new solid layer. Make sure it's comp size, and then we'll do white, and we'll stick it behind it, so it's a good background. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go up to Layer, New, Camera. And there's some camera options here. And what you want to do is probably just pick one of these custom presets. So let's just go to 50mm. That's a good general camera length. And then everything is going to be set automatically. There is a couple of things you have here. We can have lock the zoom or enable depth of field. But we can enable depth of field afterwards, so we don't have to have this on right now. So I'm going to hit OK. And when you have a camera, you can now move the camera around while keeping the text where it's at. So the camera tools are right here. And if I click and hold, you can see the different tools, and they all have the same keyboard shortcut, which is C. So what you do is I'm going to hit C on the keyboard, and I'm just going to cycle through the C's. And as I cycle through them, it's changing through the different options. So this is a move camera tool. This one is as well. And this is kind of a pan up and down. And this is your dolly in and out. And that's not zoom, that's actually physically moving the camera towards the text. So if we come into the camera, there's some camera settings in here. So we've got all the transform. This is the position and rotation and orientation of the camera itself. And then the camera options, we have here like a zoom. So I can zoom in. This is zooming the view of the camera, but not moving the camera itself. We can turn on and off depth of field, and when you have that, it's going to create some blurriness like a real camera does. So if I were to move the camera in like this, so the text is kind of the T is closer and that T is further away. Let's come in here, turn on depth of field, and let's increase the aperture, and you can see things are starting to get blurry. And then we can change the focal distance. And you can see this is getting in focus here and it's going out of focus over there. And then you can do some cool things when you can animate this. So I can come in here, keyframe the focal distance. And you can see that it looks like it's focusing across the text there. So that's just some fun stuff you can do with cameras. Now, I'm going to turn this off. Let's zoom our camera back, or actually dolly it back, and move our text to the right spot. And I want to kind of show you what's going on. And down here it says active camera. And if I click on this, there's the active camera, which is the one I've selected, or camera 1, but it's still the active camera because I have only one camera in this composition. And then there's these different views. Front, and it's showing the different views based on your composition and the camera. A good way to see what's going on is come down to one of these custom views. And with the custom view, it has its own camera settings as well, and it's the same tools. So this hitting C on the keyboard or coming up here to the orbit tools, I can move around and kind of see what my scene looks like. And this right here is my camera. See that little box? That's the camera, and this is what it's seeing. So if I come back here, this bounding box right there is my canvas. So if I were to take this camera, I'm going to hit V on the keyboard, and it brings up my selection tool, and I'm going to move it over like this. So now just the X and the T are in the bounding box. If I come back over to my active camera, X and T. So now that I'm right behind the camera, you can see it's cutting off the X right there. But this is a good way of kind of seeing what exactly the camera is seeing. Also, if we have depth of field enabled, let's move this camera back so it's capturing the full thing. Okay. Now let's turn on depth of field. And what that did is there's now another bounding box. And what that is your focal distance, or your focus. So I can move this, and now I can see what is in focus. So I can have it right there, and everything will be in focus. I come back to my active camera. It's in focus. Let's go back to my custom view. And if I were to change the focal distance to, say, right up here, come back to my active camera, it's not in focus anymore. So that's just a kind of a good visual way of seeing that. Now let's talk about lights. When you have cameras, you can also add lights. So let's come up to Layer, New, Light. And there's going to be some options. Give it a name if you're going to have multiple lights. If you just have one, light 1 is probably okay. But you come in, there's a parallel light, spotlight, point light, ambient light. And it usually defaults to spotlight. You can pick the color, but of course you can change all this afterwards as well. The intensity, the cone angle, and all these different things. Let's have it cast shadows, and let's click OK. Now, on this, the light is affecting only 3D objects. So since this text is 3D, it's affecting it. If it's not 3D, the camera or the light doesn't affect it. So let's turn it back on 3D, and same thing for this white solid. Let's make that 3D, and now, since I had a red light, if you remember, I made it red, that's why it's casting a red light on that white solid. So let's come in here and make this back white light. I can change the intensity, the cone angle to make it like a kind of a spotlight. And you can see right here the little visual representation of what the light is actually doing. We can change the cone feather. So if we want it to be really sharp around the edges, we can do that, or just really blurry. And also it's set to cast shadows. Now let's take this text Let's move the position so it's closer. And let's go into the material options of this text. So right now cast shadows is off. Let's turn it on. And what happens is it's going to cast the shadow from the text onto the background, which is this white solid. So let's open this up and let's move it further away. And as it goes further away, the shadow is going to get bigger because it's going to have further distance for it to enlarge it. And let's go back to a custom view. And you can see here, here's the camera, there is the light, here is my text, and there's the shadow. So from here, let's go into these light options. And we have cast shadow, we have shadow darkness, shadow diffusion. So I say I don't like how crisp and clear that shadow is. I can bring up the shadow diffusion. I can maybe bring down the darkness. And then there's a shadow like that. If I come back into my active camera, you can see the shadow is right there. Let's bring the diffusion down a little bit. And what I can do is as I move the light, you can see the shadow is reacting. Or if I move my layer, the shadow is going to react as well. So everything is very dynamic that way. So let's delete all this and let's start a new composition. And let's go in, let's add more, but let's do 3D text. And what I want to show you is how to create actual 3D text in After Effects. And since the last couple of versions, there's been a feature called Ray Trace 3D. And I usually don't work in Ray Trace 3D very often because I've got other options for doing 3D that I prefer. But for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use it. So if we come into Composition Settings, then right here under Advanced, there's this render and it says Classic 3D. I'm coming here and I switch it to Ray Traced. And it's going to bring up an alert. Ray Traced enables new things but also disables others. So blending modes and layer styles and track mats and different masks are not going to work with the Ray Trace, but you're going to be able to have extruded and beveled text, reflections, refractions, environmental layers, and curved footage layers, which you don't get with the normal Classic 3D or the 2.5D. So I'm going to hit OK, OK, and everything right now hasn't changed much because I haven't done anything. So if I come down here, let's go into the text. Let's go into the transform. And well, everything hasn't changed much because I haven't done anything. So first I need to do is make sure that this is 3D. So I checked it right here. Now let's come in and we have now geometry options as well as material options. So geometry options, we can add bevel styles. We can add extrusion. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to extrude this out and you can see, let's add a camera so I can rotate around this. It's actual 3D text. That's pretty cool. It's kind of hard to see because we don't have it shaded. In order to make it shaded, let's come in here and add a new light. Okay. Now you can see that it is 3D text. Let's come in here and do a bevel. So let's go angular, adds a bevel to this. We can change the bevel depth. There's concave. And if we zoom in here, concave is going to be beveled in. Convex is going to be beveled out. Angular is just going to be straight down across. Now I have this set on fast draft so it renders faster. I can come in here and do off, which is the final quality. It takes longer to render, especially if you don't have the latest and greatest graphics card. Now the ray traced feature works heavily on a graphics card, and especially if you have a new NVIDIA graphics card that is CUDA enabled, it's going to be very snappy. If you don't, it's going to be a little bit cumbersome. So I like to turn this into fast draft just so as I'm working, and then I can switch it to final before I render it out. So let's turn this bevel off because I don't want to bevel, and let's look into some of these material options. And what are the differences here? It's going to have the same thing with lights and shadows, but down here we've got reflection, we've got transparency, so we can add a little bit of transparency to this. And these material options are not going to show up unless you have it over into final quality. So there's transparency. Let's bring that down a little bit. We can make this kind of look like glass, blue glass. So let's come in and change this color back to white. We can add some reflection. And here's kind of the basics of this. So you can see that I'm not really a huge fan of the ray traced feature in After Effects. I think it's great for quick things like this, like doing some 3D text, but there's some different options that are available, and I'm going to go over those in this video. And so I just wanted to show you, if you don't have the other options or if you aren't comfortable using them, you can use this as well. So let's do one more thing. I'm going to delete this text, and let's add a new solid layer. And let's make that 3D. And let's come into the geometry options. And when you do 3D on just a solid layer, it has curvature. So I can come in here and add some curvature to this. So you can see I'm adding some curve, and it's got, you can see there's 4 sections to it. That says right here, segments 4. I can bring that up, bring it down. And as I move around, let's bring my camera out. You can see this is curving a flat plane in 3D space. Pretty cool. So there's some cool stuff you can do with that as well. So that is the ray traced 3D part of After Effects, and I'm going to go ahead and set it back to normal classic 3D. Okay, now let's turn these off. And the other features I want to talk about for doing 3D stuff in After Effects are third-party plugins and then Cinema 4D Lite. Let's first talk about third-party plugins. I've got one called Element 3D, and it is a paid plugin, so it's not something you can download for free. But I'm going to add a new solid. And Element 3D is a really nice plugin for doing 3D stuff in After Effects. So let me just show you quickly how it works. I've got a white solid. You apply the effect to a solid layer. So go down to Video Copilot, Element 3D, and then here it is. There's nothing to it yet until you go to the scene setup. So I'm going to go to the scene setup. Opens up a window like this. And I'm going to go to one of the primitives that it gives. And there's lots of different shapes here. So let's do like a torus. And here is a 3D shape. So let's bring in a new camera. Okay. And you can see that we've got a 3D shape here. That's pretty cool. So let's come back into the solids. And let's try a different shape. I've got a water droplet. Click OK. There it is there. And we can do all sorts of different presets with this as well. We can make it look like chrome, like paint, and so that's pretty cool. We can also import 3D objects. So if you have 3D objects that was built in a different program, you can import them straight in here, and that's really awesome. Such as like an alarm clock here. And you can see how pretty good this looks. There's lots of little details, and so it looks pretty darn good, and it renders really fast. Now, what we can also do with this is we can create 3D text as well, and it's really easy to do. Just bring in some text, come in here, and we go onto the custom layers. We add a custom text layer. Then when we go into the scene setup, we hit this button that says extrude, and then there's your text. And it works just like, it works similar to what we have in the ray traced. except for the fact that it's going to render a lot faster, and there's some cool options to it. So that's Element 3D. Now the last thing I want to show you is Cineware, or Cinema 4D Lite. And Cinema 4D Lite comes with the newest version of After Effects. If you're on After Effects Creative Cloud, you're going to have access to this. Let's come up to Layer, New, and right here it says Maxon Cinema 4D File. I'm going to click that, and it's going to tell me to want to save this file. Let's call this 3D. Click OK, and immediately it's going to bring the file, the layer, down into that composition. It's going to open up this plugin right here called Cineware, and it's going to open up Cinema 4D Lite. So here's Cinema 4D Lite, and I'm not going to go into great detail about Cinema 4D for two reasons. Reason number one, this is After Effects tutorials, and reason number two, I'm not the best Cinema 4D guy there is, so I don't want to fill your head with wrong ideas and maybe bad habits of Cinema 4D, but I am going to show you just really quickly kind of how to get started. So probably the thing that you'll want to be doing most is maybe 3D text. Say maybe you don't have Element 3D and you want to use Cinema 4D to do the 3D text. And so here's Cinema 4D. And so quickly I'm going to show you how to do 3D text. Right here where it says freehand, if I hover over it, I'm going to click and hold, and there's text. Click on text and it brings in text. So we can come in here and give it a name, 3D text. I can change the font to whatever font I want. That's pretty cool, right? And the way I like to navigate around in Cinema 4D is on your keyboard, 1, 2, and 3. If I hold down 1 and click with my mouse, it's going to pan around. If I hold down 2 and click with my mouse, it's going to zoom in and out. If I hold down 3, it's going to orbit around the center of your composition. Okay, so now that we kind of understand how to move around a little bit, next thing we want to do is right here where it says Hyper NURBS. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to get Extrude NURBS. And then I need to take my text layer over here in this little project window and drag it and drop it in so the arrow is pointing down on the box. And now I have 3D text. So if I click on the extrude, and then there's some, I can come down here and change up some of the settings. I'll go to Object. I can extrude that back that way. Let's kind of look around. Yep, that's cool. And say there's some settings I want to change. Right here you can see that there's a little clapboard with a gear. That's your settings dialog box. I can come in here, change this to 1280 by 720. I can come in down to this effect, and I want to add a ambient occlusion. Let's exit that out. And we can add lights just like in After Effects. So let's add a couple of lights. And then maybe a floor. Now, if I hit Command R or Control R, it's going to render this out. And you can kind of see, hey, that's kind of cool. 3D text. Now, what I want to do is I can bring this up and down. Let's bring it up a little bit. See, now there's a little bit of shadow underneath there. And I can add some more shadow to this. So if I come to my lights, and I've got this shadow, and right now shadow's turned off. So let's go to Shadow Maps or Area Lights. And you'll want to just kind of play around with this to see what you like. Hit Command R, and everything renders out, and you can see it's created some shadows back here. Now we want to add some color to this. Let's come down here at the bottom left where it says Create, and let's go to a new material. And right now it's set to nothing, so let's change the color to what we want. Let's give it a red color. Click OK. We can come in here to the basic, and there's different options. So we can add reflection to it, and then there's a new reflection tab. Bring the reflection down a little bit. Now let's take this and drag it and drop it right onto our text. And you can see it shows it right up here. So if I hit Command R now, it's going to render this out, and you can see that we've got red color to this and a little bit reflective. So let's make this a lot reflective. So I'm going to come back over to right down here where my shader is. I'm going to bring the reflection up a lot more. And let's drag and drop that back on. Bring my reflection up a lot more. And then you can see up here, this represents kind of what it looks like. Let's hit Command R. And it's looking a lot more reflective now. So that's all good and dandy if you're in Cinema 4D. But let's hit save. So just Command S or Control S on your keyboard will save it. And I'm going to flip back over here into After Effects. And what we have now is we have this right in the same place. Now, if I wanted to, I can bring in a new camera. Click OK. And we can set the camera to comp camera. So if I want to now navigate this scene with the camera in After Effects instead of moving around in Cinema 4D, I can do that. Now, all these lines, they don't look great, but that's just the way that it's being rendered. It's right now set on software render. But if I come up here to Final, it's going to render it out in full quality, just like how we had it in Cinema 4D. So, and then I can do, this is just a layer, I can do all the same things I normally would in After Effects. I can come up here, I can add a color correction to this. That's cool. Right? I can add grain to this, I can add blurs to this. So it's kind of a really powerful way of bringing 3D from Cinema 4D into After Effects. So that's all for this. Now remember, what we talked about today was 3D, cameras, lights, ray traced, and Cinema 4D Lite. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you for watching and participating in this course. Feel free to comment and share this video with others. Again, this is Mikey Bort for PremiumBeat.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.